I used to believe nothing could shake me in a few seconds. I'd lost my mother, lost my faith, and still found a way to stand. But that morning, by the waters of Lake Arrowhead, I watched something that made my heart fall straight through the floor. The scene looked like a magazine cover: soft wind, white flowers, a harp stringing faintly through the fog. Below, people were preparing for my brother Nathan's wedding. I was the maid of honor, and the wife of the man I still thought was my safest harbor, Lucas Price. I stepped out onto the balcony for air. From there, I could see the lakeside altar, and then I saw them. Lucas, in the gray suit I'd picked, standing too close to Vanessa Collins, the bride. Light glimmered off her hair as his hand rested on her waist, like it had lived there forever. They whispered something. Then Lucas leaned down. That kiss had no hesitation. My phone slipped from my hand, shattering on the stone floor. The harp kept playing, tender and cruel. I didn't scream. I just stood there, trying to swallow the wave of nausea rising in my throat. I wanted to believe I was mistaken, but Vanessa looked up, straight at me. No fear, just a half smile, thin as a blade. "Too late, Amelia," she whispered, as if speaking only to me. "It's already begun." My knees weakened. Petals fell to the carpet, laughter from below stabbing through the air like needles. I needed to leave, now. I walked quickly through the hall lined with white daisies, past the bridesmaids still giggling, unaware that my world had just exploded. Each click of my heels sounded like a countdown. I pushed open the dressing room door, and my brother was there. Nathan leaned against the table, champagne in hand, not looking surprised. "You're leaving?" I trembled. "They betrayed me, Nathan." Right in front of me. He nodded, finishing his drink. "I know." I froze.
"What do you mean, you know?" "I knew 3 months ago," he said, "and that's why I planned this wedding." I stared at him. "You knew and still let it happen?" "Not just let it happen," he replied quietly. "I orchestrated it. You think I picked Lake Arrowhead for the view. This is Crestline Holdings' private resort. And who owns Crestline?" "Richard Collins," I whispered, "Vanessa's father." Nathan nodded. "They wanted to merge our company, Hartwell Group, through marriage. Vanessa would marry me. Lucas would betray you. Together, they'd transfer our shares to Crestline. But I have proof." He pointed to the ceiling, a tiny camera hidden among the flowers. "This whole wedding is a stage, Amelia. But now, the script is mine." I stared, breathless. "What are you going to do?" "Expose them, in front of everyone." He smiled, cold, deliberate. "I've wired the entire stage. When I raise my glass for a toast, the LED screen behind us will play their hotel footage from Pasadena. Full audio, the money transfers, the lies, all of it." My heart pounded. "You're turning a wedding into a courtroom?" "No," Nathan said, "into a public trial of loyalty." Outside, the MC's voice echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare for the bride's entrance." Nathan set his glass down and moved closer. "You don't have to do anything. Just stand there and watch." "Watch what?" "The truth," he said. I turned toward the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't me anymore. Not gentle, not naive. Her eyes were cold, bright, still as the lake before a storm. I wiped my tears, picked up the broken pieces of my phone, and slipped them into my purse, part evidence, part symbol of what had just shattered. The wedding bells rang. The entire resort glowed under candlelight. Nathan and I stepped into the hallway, our footsteps matching the rhythm of the harp. Vanessa walked out with her father, radiant. Lucas waited at the altar, smiling perfectly like he'd never sinned. Nathan leaned close to my ear. "When I raise my glass, look straight at them.
I nodded, not for revenge, but to truly see the moment when lies collapse. The MC began. Love is a gift, a faith beyond condition. I looked at Lucas, then at Vanessa, their hands intertwined. Neither noticed the red lights blinking from the hidden cameras. Neither knew the LED wall behind them was seconds from lighting up. A breeze swept across the lake, scattering petals over the glowing water. Nathan raised his champagne glass. His voice was steady, clear, almost sacred. To love, he said, and to let justice speak for itself. And in that instant, I knew not everyone here would leave wearing a ring. But someone would leave in handcuffs. When the glasses clinked and everyone cheered, the light from hundreds of candles shimmered across the massive LED wall behind the stage. No one realized that moment marked the beginning of a collapse, one that had been carefully scripted for 3 months. I stood in the front row, only a few feet from where Lucas and Vanessa were still holding hands. Next to me, Nathan stepped up to the microphone. His voice was steady, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed it dozens of times. Before we bless the couple, he began, I want to tell a short story. A story about trust, loyalty, and what happens when you lose them. The crowd laughed softly, thinking it was a toast, but I saw the twitch at the corner of Nathan's mouth, his tell, the one that always came right before he dropped the truth like a bomb. Vanessa gripped Lucas's hand tighter. I saw her glance toward her father, Richard Collins, in the front row. His expression barely changed, the kind of calm that comes from a lifetime of power. Outside, the wind skimmed across the lake. My heartbeat was slow, heavy, deafening. Nathan continued, each word slicing clean through the air. They say love can make us blind. But when love becomes a tool for theft, that's not love anymore. That's crime. The laughter died instantly. Silence. Then, the LED screen flickered on, the first image. Lucas walking into a luxury hotel room. A woman's voice asked, Are you sure the Hartwell shares are all transferred? Lucas laughed. After the wedding, everything will belong to Crestline. Nathan will never see it coming. The audio was crystal clear, timestamps, location, every detail undeniable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests turned toward Vanessa. Her face had gone ghost white. Lucas stumbled a step back, scanning for an escape route. I didn't move. I just looked at him, steady, silent. Nathan set his glass down. The bride's brother and the groom's brother-in-law, he said slowly, a perfect pair. They thought they could outsmart the law. But here we have witnesses, data, and legal proof. The room erupted like a hive struck open. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. Vanessa screamed, turn it off. But no one dared touch the system. The footage rolled on, now showing Lucas taking an envelope from a man in a suit. Richard Collins. It was undeniable. Then came the scrape of a chair. Lucas stepped forward, his voice strained. Enough, Nathan. You're humiliating my wife and her family. Nathan's reply was cold and deliberate. Humiliating. Number. I'm simply calling it what it is, betrayal. Lucas turned to me, voice trembling. Amelia, I only did this for business. You understand, don't you? I met his eyes. No, Lucas, I don't. And I don't have to anymore. Flash after flash filled the hall. Someone from Hartwell's internal media team had already leaked the footage. This would be on every news site before the reception even ended. Vanessa collapsed, her perfect curls falling apart. Richard tried to stand tall, but sweat gathered at his temple. This is defamation, he shouted. I'll sue every one of you. Nathan chuckled. Perfect. See you in court. Oh, and conveniently, our attorney is already here. He gestured toward a man entering the hall, Jameson Pike, Hartwell Group's chief counsel. Pike laid a thick folder on the table. Unauthorized transfer agreements, Mr. Collins' signature, dated 2 weeks before this wedding. Silence. All eyes were on the evidence. Richard's face drained of color. Vanessa shook uncontrollably. Lucas stared at the floor, refusing to look my way. Nathan leaned toward me and said quietly,
Now you understand why I told you not to leave? I nodded, my throat tightening. You turned their wedding into a courtroom. He smiled faintly. No, Amelia. This is just the opening act. A gust of wind swept through, bending the candle flames. What I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was something quieter, colder, the kind of stillness that follows an earthquake. Truth had been revealed, but its aftershocks were only beginning. Around me, guests were on their phones, some leaving, some whispering words like fraud, police, corporate theft. The elegance of the wedding was gone, replaced by the hum of fear. Lucas tried to approach me, but Nathan stepped between us. I'd advise you not to make another stupid move, he warned. She's my wife, Lucas spat. Not for much longer, Nathan said flatly. Security began clearing the stage. Vanessa was escorted out. Richard tried to slip away but was cornered by local reporters at the door. I stood there, motionless, watching the wreckage of what had been our happiest day. Nathan looked over at me, his eyes sharp as glass. Now do you see why I said the real show is about to begin? I didn't answer. He continued, they'll fight back, and when they do, we'll finally have the chance to end this. I took a deep breath. Through the chaos, I looked out over the lake, its surface calm, glittering under the lights. Somewhere inside, pain began to crystallize into something colder, resolve. No more tears, no more fear, only truth. When the police cars arrived at the gate of the resort, I knew this wasn't the end of a wedding. It was the start of a war, one where every word, every recording, every signature would decide who still had the right to carry the Hart name. Nathan glanced back once before walking away. Keep your head up, Amelia. That was just the trailer, and in that moment I realized my life would forever be split in two, before this wedding and after it, in silence. Candles on the lake bobbed and scattered like broken memories. I stayed where I was, rooted. Lucas was escorted off by security. Vanessa had fainted, and Richard Collins vanished before the police arrived. Nathan stood watching the now empty stage, calm as if the scene had always been his to direct. He turned to me quietly. I need to show you something. We slipped behind the service area, past wilted flowers and strewn tablecloths. Nathan opened a black briefcase and spread out a large, hand-drawn chart, inked in red. It was Hartwell Group. Every block of shares, board members, transfer routes, annotated with symbols and dates. This is where it starts, he said, pointing to the top corner. When Lucas was made creative director. 3 years ago, I said. Right, and 6 months later, Crestline Holdings began buying Hartwell through shell companies. He handed me a stack of thin files. Each of those companies has a nominee director and an offshore account matching signatures traced back to Lucas. Do you see? They're not just betraying you. They're stealing the family legacy. The initials RC repeated at the bottom of transfer forms. Richard Collins. And Vanessa? I asked. She's the bridge between Lucas and his father. The wedding is the cover. Once Hartwell merges with Crestline, the voting control shifts to Richard. Nathan slid me a hurried note, an email captured by his investigator. It said, after the wedding, execute Arrowhead transfers. Nathan unaware. Amelia to be sidelined. My fingers tightened until they whitened around the paper. Sidelined. The word hit like a silent shot. My marriage, it turned out, was a footnote on their acquisition map. Nathan met my eyes, steady. I tried to warn you, but if we acted too early, they'd erase everything. I had to let them show their hand. And now? I asked, voice thick. Now they know we have proof. Richard will strike back. He never loses quietly. I pressed my back to the wall, heartbeat quick, images spinning through my mind. Meetings, Lucas's late-night texts I'd shrugged off as work.
Nathan sat beside me, tired from carrying the company for a decade.
"I'm sorry, Amelia," he said. "You shouldn't be dragged into this." "But without you, we can't stop them."
I looked at him and felt an exhausted clarity. I have nothing left to lose.
"What do you need me to do?"
He exhaled slowly.
"Keep every copy of this. Hard drives, contracts, and a duplicate of the video. If anything happens to me, hand it to Jameson Pike."
He placed a small silver USB into my palm, engraved on it, "Truth has structure," simple, heavy words, a stone I could carry. Truth didn't need noise, it needed form and proof. We left the back room as officers began cordoning off the area. Vanessa was loaded into an ambulance. Lucas sat in an interview room with 2 detectives. Richard, the staff said, had slipped out a back gate in a private car. On the drive back, Nathan drove slow across the wooden bridge over the lake.
"Do you think they'll run?" I asked.
"No," he answered.
"Richard doesn't run. He'll stay, erase what he can, then counterattack. That's why we need you. People can't destroy what's been backed up in many places."
I managed a small, bitter laugh. "So I'm a walking hard drive now?" He gave me a tired smile.
"A hard drive with a heart is more trustworthy than a server."
Light slid past the window in long streaks, like the fading trails of memory. I looked at my reflection and saw a woman who'd lost a husband and faith and was starting to find strength in the collapse.
"Why didn't you break down today?"
he asked suddenly.
I shook my head.
"Because I've seen weddings end in tears before. But this is the first time I've watched a wedding begin with the truth." The line landed and I fell silent. That night I sat in the dark when I got home, the USB cool in my hand. I slipped it into my laptop. The click echoed. Hundreds of files filled the screen. Contracts, photos, statements, recordings. Each file was a brick in the edifice of the lie they'd built. I realized then I would be the one to tear that structure down. The next morning, every major outlet ran the same headline. Wedding at Lake Arrowhead turns into a corporate trial. Hartwell heir exposes illegal merger plot. I read them without satisfaction. Everything had moved too fast. Yesterday I was a wife. Today I was the key witness in the biggest corporate scandal California had seen in years. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, even people who had toasted to our happiness the night before. I turned it off. The only sound left in my house on the mountainside was the low hiss of the coffee maker and the wind scratching at the glass. Then Nathan called.
"You holding up?"
"Barely. It all feels unreal."
"I know, but don't disappear, Amelia. The police are taking your statement this morning. Jameson's already handed them the video. I'm working on the next step."
"What step?" I asked.
He paused. "Turning that stage into a real courtroom."
That afternoon, I drove to the Hartwell headquarters. Reporters had taped newspaper clippings to the gates. Inside, employees averted their eyes, as if brushing against me might pull them into the storm. Nathan was waiting in the conference room. He drew the blinds and handed me a thick binder. "Internal audit report," he said. 15% of Hartwell shares have already shifted to Crestline in 2 months. If we don't act, Richard will gain voting control by the end of the quarter. I flipped through the pages, transfers, signatures, timestamps, all matching the data on my USB. "If we go straight to the police, Crestline's lawyers will bury it in court," I said. "We have to go public before they wipe the trail." Nathan nodded. "Exactly. That's why we'll hold a press conference right where they staged the wedding. That stage will become our open courtroom, and you'll speak." I hesitated. "You want me to stand in front of cameras? After what they did?" "That's exactly why. You're not a victim, Amelia. You're living proof. When they see you, they'll know Hartwell didn't fall." I was silent for a long time. Then I said, "I'll do it. But I'll speak in my own words." "I trust you," he said, "and this time, no one's going to hurt you again." 2 days later, we returned to Lake Arrowhead. The place once draped in wedding flowers now gleamed with news lights and camera cranes. Reporters crowded by the lake, lenses glinting in the sun. The stage had been rebuilt. No ribbons, no candles, no romance. Just microphones, a projector, and a single wooden podium. The Hartwell logo replaced the wedding backdrop. Nathan stepped up first, in a black suit, voice steady. "Thank you all for coming. We're not here to redo a wedding. We're here to hold a public trial for betrayal." The crowd buzzed. Cameras clicked in a storm of flashes. He presented the evidence one by one. Falsified contracts, illicit share transfers, Crestline's internal emails. Then he motioned for me to join him. The boards creaked under my heels as I walked to the podium, every step slicing through the murmurs. "That day," I began, "I thought I'd only lost a husband, but when I opened this drive, I realized I almost lost my family, my name, and the legacy my parents built." I placed the silver USB on the podium. Sunlight caught the engraving. "Truth has structure." I spoke about the subtle betrayals, the nights Lucas came home late, the expensive whiskey on his breath, the foreign perfume I pretended not to smell. I told them how it felt to realize the life I'd guarded was a stage built for someone else's play. Silence fell. Even the wind stilled. Nathan joined me and spoke into the mic. "We're not here for revenge," he said. "We're here to restore structure to the truth." Reporters raised their hands, voices overlapping. "What will Crestline do next? Is Lucas Price still on the board? Mrs. Hart, will you sue your husband?" I looked straight into the lights. "No, I'm not suing him for infidelity. I'm letting the law charge him with treason against his own family." The statement cracked through the air like steel. A few clapped. Then more followed. I looked down at the lake, calm and mirror-like. The wedding petals were long gone. All that remained was reflection. By nightfall, the story dominated every network. They called it the Arrowhead trial. Within 48 hours, the state froze Crestline's assets and launched a full investigation. That evening, from my room overlooking the lake, I saw helicopter lights sweeping across the water. My phone rang again. Nathan's voice was low but calm. "They're striking back," he said. "Richard's pulling favors in finance circles. I want you out of state for a few weeks." "And you?" I asked. "I'm staying. If they want to fight, I'll stand on the front line." I smiled faintly. "You said the wedding was only the opening act. Maybe this is Act 2. "Maybe," he replied. "Just don't turn off your phone." We're still on the same board. I glanced out at the silver path of moonlight stretching across the lake. "You think they'll stop?" "No," Nathan said, "but they don't realize the woman they treated like a pawn is the one holding the board." After we hung up, I sat alone. The coffee had gone cold. The little USB gleamed beside the cup. I opened the laptop and replayed the video. The same one millions had seen. When Lucas leaned in to kiss Vanessa, I didn't feel rage anymore, just silence, deep and steady like the lake at night. That stage had once been for vows. Now it was for justice. And Nathan was right. They couldn't erase the truth once the world had seen it. 3 days after the press conference, the news broke. Vanessa Collins had been discharged from the hospital. Reporters swarmed the entrance, yet she appeared, wearing the same white dress, hair loose and messy, clutching a single rose. She smiled at the cameras as if her world hadn't just collapsed. "I'm the victim," she said sweetly. "Nathan Hart was jealous. He used the wedding to humiliate me and my father." I watched the interview on TV, a chill running down my spine. She was flipping the board. And worse, she was good at it. Nathan called moments later. "I saw it," he said. "Richard's using her as a shield. They're playing the sympathy card now." "Do you have new evidence?" I asked. "I do, but this time I need a witness." That afternoon, I met with our lawyer, Jameson Pike. He opened a case file and slid a thick envelope across the table. "Mrs. Hart, this is a statement from a woman named Margaret Nolan. She says she met with Vanessa a few days before the wedding." I frowned. I've never heard that name. "She's the mother of Vanessa's ex-boyfriend," Jameson explained. "Her son lent Vanessa money. She promised to pay him back after the wedding. When he found out she was engaged to someone else, she cut contact." He pulled out several photos, Vanessa and Lucas, together at a Pasadena hotel. Timestamp, 3 weeks before the wedding. I clenched my fist. Nathan showed the video, but not photos. These are proof. Jameson nodded. "And there's more." He opened his laptop and played an audio clip. Vanessa's voice, sharp, cold, controlled. "If Richard doesn't send the money, I'll tell them who's really pulling the strings." Silence filled the room. In that moment, I saw her mask crack. Just enough to glimpse what hid beneath. That night, Nathan texted, "Bring the photos and the recording to Edgewater Hotel. Don't come alone." I arrived with Jameson. The hotel was buzzing. Richard Collins was hosting a charity gala to prove his innocence, and word had spread that Vanessa would appear. Reporters crowded outside, flashes bursting like fireworks. Nathan led us through a side entrance, up to a balcony overlooking the ballroom below. From above, I saw Vanessa in a silver gown, radiant again, standing beside her father. They clinked glasses, smiling for the cameras. Nathan leaned in. "Ready?" I nodded. He signaled to a technician, one of our own. The lights dimmed. A projector flickered to life across the main screen. The ballroom fell silent. First came the photos, Vanessa and Lucas in a hotel suite. Then the audio played, echoing through the speakers. "If Richard doesn't send the money, I'll tell them who's really pulling the strings." The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, flashes. Vanessa froze, her face drained. Richard shouted, "Turn it off!" Too late. Nathan stepped out from backstage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, the bride from that lakeside wedding has just confessed before you all." Chaos. Cameras clicked furiously. Vanessa screamed, "It's fake! I'm being framed!" But just then, a voice rose from the crowd. Margaret Nolan pushed forward, holding a manila envelope. "I took those pictures," she said firmly, "and I have the hotel receipts." The room exploded in noise. I watched from above, heart steady, watching Vanessa crumble, her control gone. Nathan lifted the mic again, voice calm, decisive. "Thank you all for coming. You've heard the witness and seen the evidence. Hartwell Group will submit everything to federal investigators." Then he turned to Richard. "You might want to prepare a statement, Mr. Collins, not a speech." The words sliced through the air like glass. Richard stood frozen. Vanessa tried to flee, but reporters cornered her. Flashlights trapped her like a spotlighted ghost. Questions rained down like hail. "Miss Collins, were you involved romantically with Lucas Price? Did Crestline pay you to infiltrate Hartwell?" She shoved a reporter aside, shouting, "I'm not saying anything!" And then, in panic, she blurted out the one line that sealed her fate. "We should have never trusted him!" Him. Richard Collins. Nathan turned to me, a faint smile crossing his face. Act 2 just ended, Amelia. Back in the car, my hands were shaking. "What do you think they'll do next?" I asked. "Retaliate," Nathan said. "And my guess they'll start by erasing evidence. Have you backed everything up?" I sent duplicates to the federal office, but tonight, go home, lock your doors. I'll meet you after my meeting. I nodded, though my chest felt tight. As the car pulled away from the hotel, I glanced through the rear window. The flashes still lit up the night like lightning. The once proud bride of Lake Arrowhead, the woman who had smiled beneath candlelight, was now trapped under the blinding glare of the press, and for the first time she didn't know how to smile. I looked down at my phone. I thought I'd escaped the nightmare, but I didn't yet know that the darkness was still following the car.
I don't remember when I fell asleep, only that my dreams were filled with flashes and the echo of camera shutters. When I woke, the world outside was still dark. Moonlight spilled through the curtains. My phone lit up on the nightstand, a message from an unknown number. He didn't just betray you. Turn on the TV at 6 a.m. It was 5:59. My heart pounded as I grabbed the remote and switched on the local news. The phone screen flickered, the same wedding footage Nathan had shown at Lake Arrowhead, but now there was more. The first part was familiar. Lucas and Vanessa in that Pasadena hotel room. The next segment, however, was something entirely new. Recorded in the same suite 2 days before the ceremony, Lucas's voice was low, rough. The blood drained from my face. I had never heard that part before. Who sent this to the news station? And how did they get the footage? My phone rang. Nathan. You watching? Yes. Was that you? No, he said sharply. I've never seen that segment. Someone else is playing a second game, Amelia. Who? Could be Richard, or someone inside Crestline turning against him. His tone hardened. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming over. By the time Nathan arrived, the sky had turned a dull gray. He wore a dark coat. Exhaustion clung to him. He set a thick envelope on the table. The police sent a copy of the subpoenas. Lucas and Vanessa have to testify tomorrow, but I don't trust Richard to sit quietly. I opened the envelope. The letterhead read, California Financial Crimes Bureau. If they talk, what will Richard do? Wipe everything, he said. He sat, staring out the window. I asked the investigators to back up all digital evidence, but that new clip, it wasn't in the original chain. Someone's tampering. Someone inside their group turned on them, I finished. He nodded. Either someone within Crestline or within the Collins family. And if that's true, they're bargaining for protection. That afternoon, we met Jameson Pike at his office. He drummed his fingers on the desk, his eyes heavy. I've traced the upload, he said. The clip was sent from an IP address inside Golden Crest Tower, Richard Collins's headquarters. Nathan frowned. You're saying he leaked a video that incriminates himself? Jameson shook his head. No. Someone in the building did. Maybe a secretary. Maybe an employee he threatened. He turned the laptop around, showing a photo of a young woman. That night, the lake outside my house was eerily still. The moon hid behind clouds. Only the faint glow from the porch light touched the trees. When I opened the door, everything looked normal, until I saw the table. The silver USB was gone. My pulse spiked. I tore through drawers, cabinets, purses. He drew a small gun from his coat, an old habit from his days in reserve police work. We moved through the house together, room by room. Nothing was broken, no forced entry. The desk drawer was slightly open, not pried, just unlocked. Nathan's jaw tightened. Only 2 people knew that passcode, you and me. Golden Crest Tower loomed over downtown Los Angeles, 47 floors of mirrored glass reflecting a maze of city lights. Nathan parked the car a few blocks away. He cut the engine, but kept his eyes on the skyscraper. Are you scared? He asked quietly. Yes, I said, but I'm more afraid of the truth being buried. The light turned green. The door clicked open. The 29th floor was colder than I expected. The smell of leather, metal, and faint cologne lingered, traces of a man accustomed to power. Nathan whispered, Richard used to come here around midnight to call his Swiss partners. If we're lucky, he still does.
You call hiding truth strength. I call it cowardice. He chuckled, a low, bitter sound. You sound just like your mother. His eyes flickered with disdain. You have... Nathan flashed his old badge. State Police! Fire alarm on 29. They stepped aside instinctively. It was all the time we needed. Outside, the cold night air hit like a slap. Nathan tossed me the car keys. Drive. I'll take the back route. No, you're coming with me. Go, Amelia. They'll track me. If they catch me, you still have the recording. Give it to Jameson. I hesitated, tears stinging, but I knew he was right. I sped away, headlights slicing through the dark. In the rearview mirror, red lights flashed against the tower's glass walls. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. I'm safe. Heading to the harbor. Meet me at your mother's old house. And Amelia, keep the recording safe. Trust no one but Jameson. I exhaled, blinking back tears, my grip steady on the wheel. For the first time in months, I felt raw fear, not of betrayal, but of power, because now I held something that could shatter an empire. When I reached my mother's old house in Pasadena, dawn was breaking. The air smelled of cedar and faded lavender. I placed my phone on the table and played the audio Nathan had sent. Helen Hart. She thought she could stop me. Now her daughter's next. I'll erase the Hart name from every record before sunrise. Richard's voice filled the quiet room, sharp, deliberate, every syllable incriminating. I knew then, once this recording went public, his game would end. But I also knew something else. The fox never dies easily, and his next move would be aimed directly at me. Morning in Pasadena was eerily quiet. Sunlight spilled through thin curtains, falling across the recorder, still playing on the table. Richard's voice filled the room, steady, smug, sharp as a verdict. I'll make sure the Hart name disappears from every record in America before sunrise. I stopped the playback. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. It wasn't just a threat. He'd done it before. My mother, Helen Hart, had died in a car accident 25 years ago. Her vehicle careened off the cliffs near Lake Arrowhead. The police called it mechanical failure. But Richard had just confirmed what I'd always feared. It was staged. My nails dug into the wooden edge of the desk until I felt blood rise beneath them. Everything spun. The wedding, the betrayal, the lies, and now, my mother's murder. This wasn't business anymore. It was bloodline. My phone buzzed, a message from Nathan. Meet me at the old pier. I found Denise. The Arrowhead Pier felt like a battlefield long abandoned. Wood creaked beneath our feet. Mist hung low over the water. Nathan stood waiting, jacket dusty, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Beside him was a slender woman clutching a canvas bag. Denise Elgato. She's the one who recorded the second video, Nathan said quietly. Denise glanced around nervously. I didn't mean to betray Mr. Collins, she whispered. But after that night, I couldn't stay silent. What night? I asked. She opened her bag and pulled out a silver gown, Vanessa's wedding dress, stained dark with dried blood. My stomach twisted. She came to Richard's office at 1 a.m., Denise said. That dress was soaked. She said Lucas was hurt while trying to retrieve data, but she was lying. I saw the blood. It wasn't his. And there was a Glock 43 in her purse. Nathan's eyes widened. You think she shot someone? Denise's voice broke. No one. Or maybe not dead yet. But Richard told me to wash the dress and destroy the security footage. I couldn't. I kept a copy. Do you still have it? I asked. She nodded. It's in my mother's house, Glendale. If you promise to protect me, I'll give it to you. Nathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You have my word. But if they know you still have the tape, They won't just threaten you. Denise gave a faint, broken smile. They've already tried. A black SUV's been parked outside my house every night this week. We left the pier immediately. The drive to Glendale was silent. Nathan's grip on the wheel tightened every few minutes. If that tape's real, he said, it could link Vanessa to a shooting. Maybe even give us the second piece to nail Richard. Do you think Lucas is alive? I asked. He hesitated. I don't know, but that blood wasn't Vanessa's. If it were Richard's, we'd have seen a cremation notice by now. We turned onto a quiet suburban street. Denise's mother's house sat at the end, pale yellow walls, weathered wooden door. Denise unlocked the door and hurried to the back room. She knelt before an old safe, hands trembling as she turned the dial. Metal clicked, then her breath caught. Empty. No, she gasped. No, it was right here. Nathan crouched, shining a flashlight into the safe. The interior showed marks, clean, professional, pried open with precision tools. They got here first, he said. The air felt heavier. I glanced toward the window. The curtain fluttered. A streak of dark red stained the wooden frame, still wet. Dear God, Denise whispered. They're still here. The front door burst open. 2 men in black suits entered without a word. Nathan pulled me behind a cabinet, gun drawn. They crossed the living room, stopping at the safe. One of them spoke in a low growl. Mr. Collins wants the original. No tape. Then we take the witness. Denise froze. Nathan gestured silently. Kitchen, now. I nodded. He counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Gunfire exploded. Glass shattered. Dust filled the air. Nathan fired first, hitting one man in the leg. Go, Amelia, he shouted. I grabbed Denise's arm and bolted for the back door. Footsteps thundered behind us, bullets slicing through the dark. We stumbled across the wet grass. A shot whizzed past my head, burying itself into a tree trunk. Denise screamed, clutching her shoulder, blood soaking through her sleeve. I dragged her up, half carrying her toward the alley. Nathan's car screeched to a stop beside us.
Get in!
He yelled. We slammed the doors just as a Molotov cocktail smashed through the house window. Fire erupted behind us, roaring to life. Flames licked the night sky, painting the quiet street in violent orange. Denise sobbed. Everything. It's all gone. No, Nathan said, voice cold and certain. Nothing in this story exists in just one copy. He turned to me, his face set like stone. I think Vanessa kept the backup, and she'll bargain with it. In blood. I stared through the rear window. The burning house reflected in my eyes like a mirror of the past. Through the smoke, I whispered, mostly to myself. The blood on the wedding dress never dried. It was only stitched over. With lies. The plane left Los Angeles before dawn. The sky a sheet of pale glass. Nathan had arranged everything. The tickets, the papers, even a temporary identity. You need to disappear for at least 2 weeks, he said. Richard's cleaning house. Vanessa's gone underground. Let them believe you've given up. Given up. The words weighed like stone. But sometimes retreat isn't surrender. It's survival. When the plane landed in Nassau, the humid air wrapped around me like salt and memory. I rented a small wooden cottage on the western shore, where the waves brushed the sand in soft, even breaths, like a heartbeat waiting for something. For days, I barely spoke. I slept too much, ate too little, and walked the shoreline until the sun bled into the horizon. But silence doesn't heal. It only prolongs the shock. So I started writing. Each morning I opened my laptop and typed every memory I could recall. My mother, Hartwell, the wedding, the blood-stained dress. I rebuilt the puzzle, piece by piece. If I didn't tell the story, truth would vanish again. One night, as I was typing, the phone rang. A calm female voice said, "This is Rebecca Chu. I work with Nathan. He said you should check your email. Now." I opened my inbox. There it was. Bahamas Transmission 02. The attachment showed airport security footage from Miami. Vanessa, blonde hair tucked under a hat, walking beside a man I didn't recognize. Below it, a timestamp and note. Date, 4 days ago. Destination, Nassau, Bahamas. She was here. I turned on every light, drew the curtains tight. Outside, the sea looked like a dark mirror. "What is she doing here?" I asked. Rebecca's voice was steady. "We don't know, but she might be looking for something Richard couldn't recover." The recording? Maybe. Or the person who filmed it. A chill spread down my spine. Denise? Rebecca hesitated. She went missing last night, but before she did, she sent Nathan a message. "If I don't make it, tell Amelia to open the box Grandma left." I froze. The box. The one I hadn't opened in 20 years, tucked in the attic of our old house at Lake Arrowhead. I'd never imagined it could be connected to all this. "Nathan will meet you there in 48 hours, Rebecca said. "But before you leave the island, be careful. Vanessa never travels alone." 2 days passed in a fog of half-sleep and dread. Every sound outside, every shadow on the sand made my pulse spike. On Monday night, I walked to a cafe by the pier to send Nathan an update. I had just opened my laptop when a familiar voice murmured behind me, "Long time no see, sister-in-law." I turned. Vanessa sat at the next table, calm, immaculate, as if we were meeting for afternoon tea instead of after gunfire and betrayal. She wore a cream silk dress, red lipstick, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She smiled. "Wrong question. You should ask why you're here, in the same place your mother once hid after her accident." I stiffened. My mother never came to the Bahamas. Didn't she? She tilted her head, lips curling. "Then maybe you should see this." She turned her phone toward me. A photo filled the screen. A woman who looked exactly like my mother, standing beside Richard Collins on a Nassau beach dated 1998. My breath caught. "That's impossible." Vanessa's voice stayed smooth, almost gentle. "Richard loved your mother once. There was a contract between them, one that gave him control of Hartwell for the next 20 years. I stared at her, searching for even a flicker of doubt behind those glasses. "So you came here for that contract?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I came for the recording your mother sent from here, the one Richard never found." She leaned closer, her perfume sharp with amber and danger. Her whisper brushed my ear. "If you find it before I do, you'll die. If I find it first, you'll live, but you'll stay silent forever." Then she stood, leaving behind the scent of perfume and a cold shadow that clung to my skin. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch, staring at the moon's reflection dragging across the waves. Rebecca's words echoed in my head. The box Grandma left. I opened my laptop and searched old photos of my mother. In one, she stood in our backyard beside a small wooden box carved with lavender blossoms, the Hart family emblem. She used to say, "Don't open it until you're ready to know why I left Lake Arrowhead." Now I understood. The truth about her, about Hartwell, about Richard, and even Vanessa, was inside that box.
I pressed a hand against my chest, breathing in the salt-heavy air. The waves kept rolling, steady and certain. But inside me, everything was shifting. No more fear, no more running. Only one path remained. Back to where it all began. When the plane touched down in California, the fog hung low over the pines that circled Lake Arrowhead. I drove the rented car along the winding mountain road, the tires crunching over gravel, a dry, lonely sound that felt like memory stirring awake. The old house appeared after a curve, slanted roof, gray walls, porch overgrown with moss. 20 years. Every brick, every window still stood where it always had. Only time had changed its color. I parked, stood for a long while, and breathed in deeply. The air smelled like the past, damp wood, pine resin, and the faintest trace of lavender. Inside, I flicked on the light. The dim glow fell across dust and floorboards. Everything remained frozen in place. The cracked teapot, the worn notebook by the stove, the photo of my mother and me on the porch. On the wall, a dark burn mark still lingered, the scar from the small fire Richard's men had staged after the accident. I climbed the attic stairs slowly. The door creaked open, wind rushing in with the scent of metal and dust. In the corner, under a thin cloth, rested a lavender-colored wooden box, its brass lock dulled with age. I sat down and used the old key that my mother once wore on a chain around her neck. The lid clicked open. Inside weren't jewels or keepsakes, but a bundle of letters and a small silver key. The letters were dated 1998, the year she died. The handwriting was hers, slanted, strong, deliberate. Amelia, if you are reading this, Richard has already carried out the first part of his plan. But you must understand, Hartwell isn't just a company, it's a front. The real power doesn't belong to Richard. It belongs to the one behind him. The Crest name. I felt my pulse quicken. I kept reading. He intends to use Hartwell as a channel to move assets for projects in Geneva. I've hidden the proof in a private vault. The key is inside this box. But Amelia, don't search for it while you're still afraid. Because when truth surfaces, blood will spill again. My hands trembled. She had known everything. She had known her death wouldn't be random. I opened the next letter. A black and white photograph slid out. My mother sitting beside a woman who looked eerily like Vanessa. The same eyes, the same smile. Even the same small mole by her cheek. On the back it read, Evelyn Crest, Bahamas, 1980. I froze. Crest Richard's surname. The woman in the photo, Evelyn, was Vanessa's mother. The pieces locked together. Vanessa wasn't just a pawn or a lover. She was blood, the daughter of the woman who had built the empire Richard inherited. I searched the box again and found a small cassette tape labeled Arrowhead, July 1998. I pulled out my mother's old player from the closet, plugged it in, and pressed play. A crackle. Then her voice, trembling but clear. They think I don't know. Richard promised to marry me. Then he promised Evelyn Crest the same thing. When I discovered Hartwell was just a laundering front, I planned to go to the police, but I overheard him say, if Helen doesn't stay quiet, make her car slip. Amelia, if you hear this, leave, but if you choose to stay, end it for me. Tears blurred my vision. In that moment, fear dissolved, replaced by something sharper, heavier, inherited fury. I took the silver key and tried it on the attic's built-in safe. It fit. Inside was an old external drive and a sealed envelope stamped with the insignia of Helvetia Private Bank, Geneva. I tore it open. Inside were records of covert transfers between Crestline Capital and Hartwell's secret fund. Over $240 million, signed by Richard Collins and Evelyn Crest. My mother had backed up everything. At the bottom was one final note, short, steady, carved into my heart. Amelia, when you open this box,
Don't carry hatred. Carry truth. It's the only thing they fear. I folded the letter, looked around the attic. Outside, the wind from the lake began to rise. Don't leave the house. Lock the doors and keep the originals on you. I'm coming. Richard's desperate. He'll come before sunrise. I turned toward the window. Across the distant bridge that cut over the lake, a pair of headlights crawled slowly toward the house. Even through the fog, I knew. He was coming. I opened the drawer and pulled out my mother's old revolver, checked the chamber. Loaded. For the first time, my hands didn't shake. I walked to the door, breathed in the scent of pine and smoke, and whispered, "I'm not running anymore, Mom." The sound of tires on gravel grew louder. Through the slit in the curtain, headlights swept across the trees, carving long shadows over the lake. A black SUV stopped at the gate. Nathan still hadn't arrived. I switched off the light, clutching my mother's old revolver, heart hammering dry against my ribs. The car door opened. A man stepped out, tall, limping slightly, but unmistakable. Richard Collins. No tailored suit now, no polished arrogance, just a worn leather jacket and the face of a man frayed by time. Yet in his eyes still burned that familiar gleam, the one that His footsteps thudded on the wooden floor, slow, deliberate. "Amelia," he called. "We've gone too far, you and I. You have something I need." "And I have something you need, your life." I held my breath, my finger tightened on the trigger. He stopped at the base of the stairs. "The box is in the attic, isn't it? Helen hid hers there, too. You know, I did love her, once." But she hesitated too, right before her car went over the cliff. A chime echoed suddenly, my phone alert near the window. I flinched. Richard lunged, climbing 2 steps in a blur. I fired. The shot cracked through the house. Wood splintered. He fell back, clutching his left shoulder, blood spreading fast. "You have no idea," he hissed, "what you've just started." I backed away, gripping the wooden box tight. That's when I noticed it. In the glow of moonlight through the window, a small purple mailbox bolted to the attic beam. Dustless. Someone had touched it recently. I dragged a chair, pried it open. Inside, a small USB drive and a folded letter, my mother's handwriting. "If you find Richard, don't punish him. Expose him. This USB holds the confession I sent to the LA prosecutor with Crestline's financial data. But there's one thing I never told you. The person who helped me back it up was Nathan." My breath caught. Nathan. I read it again and again. Each line sank deeper. "If you see him, ask who opened the purple mailbox first." Footsteps thundered downstairs. Nathan burst in, eyes wide, freezing. He plugged in the USB, hit. I stood frozen, watching the two. That night, Lake Arrowhead was wrapped in a fog so thick it felt like the breath of restless souls. The police had taken Richard away. Nathan stayed behind for questioning. I stood alone on the porch, watching the blue and red lights ripple across the water. It should have ended there, but inside me, something still ached. A single unanswered question. What really started the accident in 1998? The next morning, I drove to the old Arrowhead police station. An older officer, Captain Whitmore, recognized my mother's name immediately. "Hart, huh? I didn't think anyone from that family would ever come back here. I'm here to see the file on my mother, Helen Hart." He nodded slowly and led me into the archive room. The folders were brittle, the pages yellowed. Photographs showed the car twisted at the bottom of a cliff. Front axle broken, body scorched. Then one detail stopped me cold. A technical note highlighted in red. Front brake line cut cleanly, not consistent with mechanical failure. I pointed to it. Why wasn't this investigated further? Whitmore sighed. We weren't allowed to. 2 days later, the case was pulled by the county court. The request came under the name Richard Collins. I felt my lungs tighten. Is there anything else? He hesitated, then pulled out a small envelope. A confidential witness sent us this photo, but before we could publish it, they disappeared. I opened it carefully. Inside was a blurry Polaroid. Another car parked near the cliff above, 2 figures arguing. One was my mother, the other, unmistakably, a young Nathan. My knees went weak. You're sure? Whitmore nodded. He was there that night, but his name was erased from every witness record. I left the station trembling. The sun was bright, but all I could see was darkness. Nathan had told me he'd only known my mother professionally, but he was there, the night she died. I drove straight to the old evidence warehouse. The guard on duty recognized my name and hesitated. That car? Still here. Nobody's touched it since '98. Inside, the air was thick with rust and time. My mother's car sat under a gray tarp, its frame twisted, steering wheel charred. I brushed away the dust, running my fingers along the dashboard. Something glinted beneath the driver's seat, a small metal lockbox engraved with H. Inside was a spool of old magnetic tape. I brought it to a technician. Hours later, a grainy video flickered to life. The footage was shaky, handheld. My mother was arguing with a younger Nathan, his face pale, voice breaking. Helen. You don't understand, Nathan. They'll kill me. Nathan. I can protect you, but if you go public, Richard will lose control. Helen. I don't need protection. I need honesty. Nathan. I can't. Then, static, a struggle, a flash of light. The camera fell, leaving only the sound of crashing metal and a scream. I sank into the chair, the air knocked out of me. Nathan hadn't just known. He'd been there, and maybe that accident had begun with his push. That night, I sat in the dark living room, the old clock ticking like a heartbeat. When Nathan walked in, I didn't turn around. How long were you going to hide it? He froze. I opened the laptop. The frozen image of my mother mid-fall filled the screen. You were there. His voice cracked. I didn't kill her. I came to help her escape. But when she grabbed the keys, Richard called. I tried to stop her. She slipped. The car went over. I looked at him, my throat tight. And then you let Richard rewrite it as an accident. He lowered his head. I was young, scared. If I told the truth, he'd have killed me too. Helen told me to survive, so someone could still protect you. Tears blurred my vision. And you did survive, while she didn't. He stepped closer, but I backed away. So what now, Amelia? He whispered. Now that the truth can destroy us both. I turned toward the window. Dawn was breaking over the lake, the surface fractured with light, like a cracked mirror finally reflecting everything at once. Now, I said quietly, no one dies for their silence again, but the guilty won't walk free. I picked up my phone and hit send, forwarding every file, every confession, every record to the California State Attorney's Office. Nathan nodded slowly. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. Then I'll walk with you. Until the end. Outside, a helicopter roared across the lake, the sound heavy and final, like a bell tolling for justice long overdue. For the first time in 25 years, I could finally breathe. The accident had come full circle, and though the Hart family line would forever carry its fractures, those cracks now gleamed with light, proof that truth had finally found its way through. 2 a.m, the city shimmered in silver-gray light, cold, brittle, like shattered glass. I sat behind the wheel, staring up at the steel and glass monolith that pierced the fog. Crestline Tower. Inside that building lay what was left of Richard Collins, and a 25-year-old secret no one had dared to touch. Nathan sat beside me, gripping the leather bag that held the external drive. His voice was low and steady. There's a retinal scanner inside. But I still have an old tech access card. We'll have 3 minutes before the system flags us. I drew a slow breath and nodded. 3 minutes is enough to bring down an empire. The card reader beeped, dry, mechanical. A green light flashed. The door unlocked. We stepped inside. The marble floor gleamed beneath sterile white light. The air smelled of ozone and money, cold, precise, inhuman. Nathan moved first, his reflection cutting across the mirrored walls. Server rooms on 31. That's where Richard kept every contract, video, and Hartwell account ledger. If we pull the original files, Crestline collapses. We took the stairs to avoid the cameras. Each step stretched time thinner. 29, 30, 31. The black steel door loomed before us. The fingerprint pad glowed faintly. Nathan pulled out a small strip of silicone. It's coded from the last time I was in here. 2 seconds. Click. The lock released. Rows of servers blinked alive in ghostly blue light. The hum of spinning drives filled the room like the breath of some sleeping creature. Nathan connected the hard drive. The screen lit up. Data Retrieval Hartwell Legacy Project. "This is it," he whispered. The progress bar crawled upward. 12%, 17%, 21%. Then a sound. Beep, beep, beep. Red lights flickered across the walls. I turned. The door sealed shut automatically. "They've detected us," Nathan muttered. "Someone's watching." The monitor blinked, and suddenly her face filled the screen, half lit, half shadow. Vanessa Collins. She looked hollowed out, pale, wet hair clinging to her face, but her smile was still razor sharp. "I told you, sister-in-law, where there's light, there's me." Nathan stepped forward. "Vanessa, stop this. You don't need to, don't I?" She cut in. "I came here 2 hours ago. I already downloaded what I needed. You're just copying an empty shell." I scanned the room. One server in the far corner blinked with a transfer light. "You're sending the data out," I said. "Exactly. Straight to Geneva, my mother's fund. No one can touch it now." Her voice filled the sterile air, low and controlled. "Your mother died because of Richard," I said quietly. "He used her, just like he used you. And you still want to protect the Crest name?" Vanessa hesitated, then smiled, colder. "No, I want to inherit it." In that moment, I understood. Vanessa hadn't come to salvage anything. She had come to become him. Nathan yanked open an electrical panel. "We can't let her finish. We have to cut the power." He pulled the main switch. The room went black. Emergency lights blinked to life. Vanessa's voice screeched through the speaker. "You think cutting the power stops me? The upload's already in the cloud, Amelia." The screen flared one last time. Transfer completed. 100%. I clenched my fists. "No, it's not over." I reached into my coat. The purple mailbox USB, my mother's last key. I plugged it into the backup console. A line appeared on the monitor. "Do you wish to override Crestline access?" I hit yes. Lines of code began to reverse, files unraveling one by one. On the screen, the Crestline emblem fractured and burned away. Vanessa screamed through the feed. "You don't understand! That'll erase everything. Hartwell's name, your mother's legacy." "My mother never wanted a company," I said softly. "She wanted the truth." The drives began to overheat. Humming like thunder, smoke curled from the panels. "Amelia, we have to go!" Nathan shouted. "Go first," I said. "You have the crash footage. Keep it safe." "I'm not leaving you, now!" I pushed him toward the exit. I pulled the USB free and slipped it into my pocket. A bright surge, a flash. The servers erupted in fire. The alarms howled. I stumbled down the stairwell through a wave of smoke. Nathan's flashlight cut through the haze. He grabbed my hand as the ceiling above us gave way. We burst out into the night just as Crestline Tower exploded in flame, a column of light tearing open the sky. Ash rained down, pieces of signed contracts and currency drifting like dying moths. I stood there, chest tight, lungs burning. Everything, money, lies, power, was disintegrating before my eyes. But in the ashes, Hartwell was finally free. Nathan coughed, his voice hoarse but sure. You know, your mother would be proud. I watched the fire consume the tower and whispered, No, she'd just want us to breathe again. 3 days after the explosion, smoke still hung over what was left of Crestline Tower. The headlines were everywhere. Mysterious fire destroys Crestline financial data. Richard Collins dies in hospital. Primary suspect, Vanessa Collins, missing. I watched the broadcast from a cheap motel near the lake, the glow of the TV cutting harsh across my face. Nathan sat beside me, rebandaging the burn on his arm, the skin blistered, seeping faintly through the gauze.
You should feel proud,
he rasped.
Everything Richard built is ash.
I shook my head. No, when someone like Vanessa disappears, it only means she's preparing for her next move. He said nothing. Among the charred documents on the table lay a new envelope. No sender, no stamp, just 3 handwritten words. Play me. Nathan frowned.
Careful.
I slid it open. Inside was an old mini cassette tape, the kind from the early 2000s, and a folded note. The devil doesn't die in fire. It just changes its voice. A chill ran down my spine. I slid the tape into the player and pressed play. The static hissed, then a voice emerged, low, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. Hello, Amelia. If you're hearing this, it means I survived. Vanessa. I gripped the edge of the table as her voice, smooth and deliberate, filled the room. I used to think you were weak, a woman living in your mother's shadow. But now I see, you're more like her than I ever imagined. You destroyed an empire with a single USB. Impressive, but you forgot one thing. Fire doesn't erase data. It only erases footprints. I backed up everything before the tower burned, and this time, I don't need Crestline. I've built something new. Where my name begins the story, not ends it. Nathan's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward mine. Vanessa's voice dropped, soft but venomous. Remember, I didn't kill your mother. Richard did. But who pushed the car that night? Who stayed silent for 25 years? I've seen that video, Amelia. Your mother wasn't alone in the frame. Nathan was there. The tape clicked off. Silence flooded the room. The neon light outside pulsed against Nathan's face, outlining exhaustion and guilt.
She's lying,
he whispered, though his voice faltered halfway. She has the video, I said flatly. She found the original. He exhaled, tapping his fingers against the table.
If she did, that means the copy from police storage was stolen too. She wants leverage. Leverage for what? Not money, he said. Control. She wants to rewrite the story. If this tape goes public, people will believe she's the survivor and I'm the traitor.
And me?
His expression softened. You're the witness. She'll want you silent.
That afternoon, Rebecca Chu called. Her voice was tense. Amelia, I just got a hit from Interpol. There's been a major transfer from a shell company in Zurich to another in the Bahamas. The name on the account? Evelyn Crest Foundation. I froze. Vanessa's using her mother's name. Exactly. The funds came from Richard's holdings. He signed everything over before he died. Nathan muttered. She's legitimized herself. Now she controls Crestline, under the mask of a heritage restoration fund, legally untouchable. Is there a way to prove she's still alive? I asked. Rebecca hesitated. Maybe, but you'll have to go to Geneva. There's a Helvetia bank vault, your mother's old deposit box. If Vanessa accessed it, the system will log her biometrics. I let out a bitter laugh. Then that's where the devil went to hide. Nathan placed a hand on my shoulder. If we go, we may not come back. I know, I said quietly. But if we don't, everything my mother died for, everything you've regretted, will mean nothing.
Snow was falling when our plane touched down in Geneva. The city glittered under gray light, beautiful and silent, like a cathedral built of ice. Inside Helvetia Bank, marble floors echoed under our steps. A man in glasses greeted us politely. Welcome, Vault 472, registered under the Hart Estate. Identification, please. I handed him my mother's will card. He nodded and led us down to the vaults, a cold, metallic labyrinth humming with unseen power. Camera lights swept the walls, their red dots blinking. Vault 472 opened with a hiss. Inside wasn't cash or documents, just a small black case. I lifted the lid. Another tape. The label read, Vanessa, Private Confession, 2024. Nathan stared. What the hell? I slid it into the bank's player. Vanessa's voice filled the room again, but softer this time. Human. If anyone finds this, it means I went further than I should have. I thought I could control everything, the way my father did, but I see now. The Crest bloodline isn't power, it's a curse. I was wrong. If I don't survive, give this to Amelia Hart. She deserves to end what I began. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Tears burned my eyes. Vanessa, confessing. As we left the bank, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. Amelia, breaking news! An unidentified body has been found in the Jungfrau region. The fingerprints match Vanessa Collins. I stopped in the snow. The wind howled off the Alps, freezing the tears on my cheeks. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low. Maybe, for the first time, she told the truth. I nodded, but inside, the echo of her earlier words clawed at me still. The devil doesn't die in fire. It just changes its voice. Snow fell thick over the rooftops of old Geneva that morning. I sat by the window, a cold cup of coffee in my hands, watching people hurry beneath black umbrellas. The room was silent enough to hear the tick of the clock. Vanessa's tape still lay on the table, the lamp glinting off its clear plastic shell. I had played it at least 10 times. Every breath, every pause carried 2 possibilities: repentance or manipulation. Nathan came in, his coat drenched from the snow. He dropped a newspaper on the table. The headline screamed, Vanessa Collins, prime suspect in Crestline scandal, found dead. Below it was a photo of a body half buried in snow, golden hair visible under the frost. Did the police confirm? I asked. Not yet, he said. No ID, no gunshot wounds, just bruising around the neck. They think suicide. I stared out at the gray sky. Or someone wants us to think that. He didn't reply. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small metal card. I found this inside the tape box at the vault, he said. It has the Helvetia logo, but on the back, there's an engraving. Vault E9. I looked up. Another vault? Maybe. Or the last piece of your mother's story. We went back to the bank at noon. The clerk's expression changed when she saw the card. Vault E9, she repeated softly. That vault isn't listed in the public system. It only opens with biometric verification from 2 people sharing the Hart name. Nathan gave a dry laugh, a secret within a secret.
The E9 level was deep underground, colder and quieter than anywhere else. The air felt ancient, like the inside of a tomb. When the door opened, inside sat a small brown leather notebook and an old wooden box carved with a key trapped inside a storm. I opened the notebook first. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. If you've reached this place, it means you already know the truth about Hartwell. But not all of it. In 1980, Evelyn Crest wasn't just Richard's mistress. She ran the underground financial network known as Project Mirage. Hartwell was a laundering front. When I discovered it, I signed a secret agreement to protect you. The original contract is in this box. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside was a roll of microfilm and a single slip of paper in French. En cas de mort de Helen Hart, propriété revient à Amelia Hart. In the event of Helen Hart's death, ownership transfers to Amelia Hart. Nathan's eyes widened. If we give this to Interpol, the entire Crestline system in Europe collapses. Evelyn, Richard, Vanessa, all of them. But when I flipped the paper over, I froze. At the bottom corner was a signature. Robert Nathaniel Hart. I turned slowly. You signed this? Nathan's face drained of color. Amelia, listen. Robert Nathaniel Hart. You never told me your real surname was Hart. He exhaled shakily. I'm a distant cousin of your mother. After her death, I was sent abroad so Richard couldn't find me. I changed everything, my name, my identity. You hid it because you thought I wouldn't trust you? No, he said, his voice raw. Because I once worked for Richard. I was close to becoming him. I betrayed your mother once, and I couldn't bear to do it again. The silence in that vault was heavy, pressing. For the first time, I saw not the man who'd hidden the truth, but someone who'd carried the weight of a cursed bloodline for 25 years. If you really want redemption, I said quietly, this is your chance. That night, we walked into Interpol headquarters. The marble halls were nearly empty, lights casting a pale glow over the floors. I placed the microfilm on the chief inspector's desk, Mr. Muller, the man who'd been tracking Crestline from the beginning. He examined it under magnification, then looked up, astonished. These are original transfer records, mirrored signatures, complete trace of shell companies. This alone could indict an entire network. Do you understand what you've just handed over? Yes, I said, the final legacy of Hartwell, and the confession on behalf of 2 generations. He nodded slowly, sliding the evidence into a secure case. We'll protect you, Mrs. Hart. But be cautious. Those who survive the ashes rarely stay still. As we stepped outside, the night wind off Lake Geneva bit through my coat. The sky was ash gray, bleak but open. Nathan walked beside me. You know, he said softly, Helen once told me, truth isn't for revenge, it's for closure. I think you've given her that. I smiled faintly. Maybe for her. But for me, this is just the beginning. He paused. Beginning of what? I looked out toward the glittering reflection of the bank lights on the lake. Of rewriting the Hartwell story, not with blood, but with truth. Back in the motel, I replayed the end of Vanessa's confession. Her voice seemed to drift from another world. If you're hearing this, I've gone too far to turn back. But you know, Amelia, maybe we're not so different. We're both products of inherited lies. The only difference is, you chose to tell the story. I chose to live inside it. I sat there a long time, then removed the batteries from the recorder. Outside, snow kept falling, slow, steady, eternal. And I whispered, almost to myself, our story wasn't written in fire, but in memory. And once memory is spoken aloud, it never goes silent again. 3 months later, Geneva was thawing into spring.
though the snow still clung stubbornly to the mountains. News of the Crestline scandal filled every international headline. Names that once felt untouchable were now printed in bold on the indictment list. Richard Collins, deceased. Evelyn Crest, deceased. Vanessa Collins, presumed dead. And at the bottom, Amelia Hart, primary witness and plaintiff. I sat in the Swiss federal court. The light above was pale, winter's residue refusing to leave. Nathan was behind me, seated among the press, no longer hiding, but now listed as co-contributor of evidence. On the stand, Prosecutor Mueller presented the original Helvetia microfilm. Every signature, every transfer line flickered on the large projection screen. The hall was silent, save for the faint scratching of the clerk's pen. Mueller's voice was steady, deliberate. Crestline Capital operated a covert transfer network exceeding $240 million over 2 decades. Involved parties include Richard Collins, Evelyn Crest, and the final inheritor, Vanessa Collins, all substantiated by the archived records of the late Helen Hart and her daughter, Amelia Hart. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, but I heard only the rhythm of my own heartbeat, slow, heavy like an old door opening into years long buried. The defense attorney rose, a silver-haired man with an icy tone. Mrs. Hart, do you have any evidence that Vanessa Collins is still alive, or are you merely constructing a legend for a dead woman? I lifted my head. I don't need to prove she's alive. I only need to prove the system she built still is. Then I opened my case and pulled out the final USB, the one from the purple mailbox. This contains data recovered from the Crestline Tower servers, direct access keys to the Evelyn Crest Foundation. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The defense shouted, "Objection! Unverified source!" Mueller smiled faintly, raising a document. Verified. The data matches the audio record left by Vanessa Collins in Vault E9. Let's play it. The screen came to life. Vanessa's voice filled the room, not like a monster this time, but like a woman undone. I lived in my father's shadow. I believed power could replace truth. But truth has structure, and that structure forgives no one. The echo of her words faded. Silence. Then a single flash from a camera, capturing Mueller's final line. That was not only a confession, it was an indictment of an entire generation. The verdict was delivered that afternoon. The International Court seized all Crestline Foundation assets, reallocating them to a global transparency and recovery fund. The name Hartwell was cleared from the investigation. But the moment that broke me wasn't victory. It was when Mueller approached, holding a small box. Inside were 2 silver handcuffs, the kind used as mementos in landmark cases. "We call these the handcuffs of truth," he said. "One represents the bound, the other, the one who unlocks." I lifted them, both cold, both gleaming under the light. One had an engraving, Helen Hart, 1998. Tears blurred my sight. The chill of the metal felt like a bridge between the mother who had been silenced and the daughter who finally made the world listen. Nathan came forward, resting a hand on my shoulder. "She'd be proud of you." I smiled through the tears. "No." She just asked, "Are you going to keep living now?" That evening, church bells echoed across Geneva. Nathan and I walked along Lake Leman. The golden light rippled over the water like fading memory. "When everything's settled," I said, "I'm going back to Arrowhead. The old house needs its doors opened again." He smiled. "And me?" "You?" "I'll go with you," he said. "No reason left to hide." I turned to him, and for the first time there was no unfinished promise between us. Only truth, simple and steady. 2 weeks later, I was home. Lake Arrowhead was as still as the day my mother left. Dust shimmered in the sunlight as I opened the door. On the table, our old photograph, mother and daughter, remain untouched. I placed the silver handcuffs beside it and whispered, "Mom, I did it." Not for revenge, but to breathe again. Outside, wind brushed through the pines. A single white feather drifted in through the window, spinning slowly before resting on the table. I smiled and closed my eyes. Somewhere in that quiet, I heard her voice, soft, certain. "Good. You finally chose to live." The following summer, Lake Arrowhead mirrored the sky. A vast, glassy blue so still I could hear the children next door paddling in the water. I stood on the porch, holding a cup of lavender tea, breathing in the scent of pine and mountain wind brushing my collar. The old house was finally open again. The floors had been refinished, the walls painted soft cream, the window panes replaced. But one thing I didn't change: the thin white curtain my mother had sewn by hand. Every time the wind passed through, it fluttered like her quiet breath returning home. Nathan sat on the steps, fixing an old radio. He wore reading glasses now, a few silver strands in his hair. When he looked up, he smiled.
Every time it picks up a signal, I swear I hear Geneva.
I smiled back. And I hear my mother. On the table lay the silver handcuffs in their box, beside a new journal I had just begun. On the cover, Hartwell, Truth in Motion. Sometimes, letters arrived. One from a journalist in New York. "Because of your testimony, we reopened several cases of money laundering through art funds. Thank you for daring to speak." Another from a young woman. "I watched your trial online. My mother was falsely accused at her job. Thank you for proving that truth still has a voice." I read each one carefully, folded them and placed them in the drawer beside my mother's photograph. Now I understood. When we tell our stories, memory stops being a wound and becomes a witness. One evening, as sunset stretched across the lake, Nathan brought out the small wooden box we'd found in Vault E9 but never opened. He set it on the table and smiled. "It's time." I lifted the lid. Inside wasn't money or papers, just a small key and an old card. For the last of the Hartwell line. "Open the attic door when you're ready to forgive." We climbed the wooden stairs together. The attic smelled of pine and dust, like the air hadn't moved since 1998. The key turned with a soft click. Inside sat a chest labeled in fading ink, "Helen and Amelia, 1998. I opened it. Inside were dozens of letters, VHS tapes, and a hand-stitched leather journal. On the first page, my mother had written, "If you're reading this, it means you've gone farther than I ever could. Use pain to illuminate, not to burn." My hands trembled. And then, as if the air itself spoke, I could hear her voice again, warm, steady, like sunlight through a window. "Truth is not a weapon. It's light. Keep it to guide you, not to blind others." I looked at Nathan. He nodded. We didn't read all the letters. We didn't need to. The past no longer demanded confessions. It just wanted to rest. That August, I accepted an invitation to speak at a global ethics conference in Zurich. When I stepped on stage, I didn't read the speech I'd prepared. I simply said, "We can't change the past, but we can stop it from repeating by telling the truth one day earlier, one sentence braver." The room fell silent, then one person began to clap, and then another. And soon the sound grew, hundreds of hands echoing the same vow. In the front row, I saw young faces,
People who had only known Crestline as a headline, now writing down my words like a promise for their own generation.
That night, Nathan and I sat by the lake. Moonlight rippled over the water, still enough that I could hear my heartbeat. He handed me a glass of white wine.
"To a beautiful ending," he said. I smiled. "No, to truth, and to the people brave enough to face it." We clinked glasses, the crystal sound soft as a bell. In that moment I knew. The story of Hartwell had come full circle. But its light, my mother's, mine, even Vanessa's, would keep seeping through the cracks, illuminating every place where darkness once hid. The next morning, I placed a copy of Truth in Motion on my desk, along with a letter addressed to the Geneva Union Foundation. The last line read, "Please use this fund to establish the Helen Hart Scholarship for women who were deceived, silenced, yet still found the courage to stand." I signed it, then added 3 simple words beneath my name: "Still breathing." As I closed the journal, the wind rose off the lake, carrying the scent of pine and mist. And I finally understood. Justice isn't a destination. It's a journey. Sometimes, it takes just one person willing to tell the truth for an entire generation to be freed. If my story touched you, let me know where you're listening from. Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe. Because here, we believe that truth has structure, and light always finds its way home.